If you ache for truth, goodness, and beauty, if you're hungry for a Christianity with substance and strength, if you long for a faith that's big and bold and biblical and all about Jesus Christ, if you're inspired by the idea of one church that has spanned 20 centuries, 24 time zones, and 2 hemispheres, enfolding every race, nation, and language, then you're considering Catholicism.
Welcome back to the Considering Catholicism podcast, and once again, welcome back to
Ed the Protestant.
Welcome to the listeners to the Considering Catholicism podcast, featuring
with special guest
Ed the Protestant.
I love it.
Anyway, we are now in the Christmas season,
right?
With all that entails.
What it has entailed for me was my wife and I agreed not to buy gifts for each other this year, or at least if you see something in the as advertised on TV aisle at Aldi, sure, but otherwise we're not going in for the big gifts. But we were in IKEA a couple of days ago, and we bought a shoe holder thing for the hallway. You open up these drawers and your cupboards, and I spent yesterday afternoon and part of the evening assembling it, and I'm feeling it worked, and I actually did it. And I didn't need any counseling afterwards.
You mastered the assembly of flat pack furniture?
Yeah, and the instructions don't come with any words.
No, there's like little Swedish pictures.
Yeah, the pictures, not just pictures, they're Swedish.
Swedish pictures.
Yeah, with the little Swedish guy who I don't understand. And Sven. So there's so I also called up a YouTube video of a guy making this particular, and I followed him along, and it's actually...
Was his name Lars?
Oli, I think it was. Oli and Sven.
But as a Christmas present, it's not that fun. It'd be like when you were a little kid and
it's like
you got
socks.
You got like pants for Christmas, right? You're like a 10-year-old boy, and you're like, I got pants for Christmas. And you're like, oh, and you go, what am I supposed to do? Go wear my new pants on Christmas morning?
See, this is the time.
I want a BB gun or a skateboard.
This is the time of life. This is indicative of the time of life. Is my wife and I are going to, on Christmas morning, stand with our cup of cheer, looking at the shoe container thing that we bought.
This sounds like the worst Christmas ever.
The best Christmas ever was I was moaning about, this is about 35 years ago, I was moaning about I never get anything fun anymore.
Yeah, and now you've...
And this drummer from the church I was attending, he showed up at my house unannounced. He'd never been to my house, I don't think. He showed up at my house, and he had a little remote-controlled car for me, and he gave it to, I think he paid $10 for it. And I spent all that day, all that afternoon, like making little hills with the carpet to run it all.
Now this was 35 years ago?
Yeah.
So it's been a long, slow descent since then.
Yes, it has.
Till now on Christmas morning, you wake up all excited and you come downstairs and you guys stand around the shoe tree.
And I'm on my way to the home improvement store after this to get something to attach it to the wall. And I'm
really special.
Yeah.
You guys will stand around and look at the shoe holder.
Maybe I'll decorate it.
I just feel sad for you. Which is a good transition, because you think about all
cheer me up, Greg.
Yeah, because you think about all the cool presents you could have, and there's no lords a leaping, no swans a swimming, no partridge,
ladies dancing,
and certainly no partridge in a pear tree, because we're here to talk about the 12 days of Christmas, and Ed's going to have the 0.1 days of Christmas where you have the shoe holder mounted to the wall.
I was fine until you started in on me. Now I'm all depressed. We're going to talk about this.
Okay. The 12 days of Christmas, this song that,
right.
I don't even remember. I show how little preparation I've done here. I should have pulled it up on my phone, the lyrics. So we pull it up on your phone, so we can go through
signal here, but
what
I'll try it.
Comes on the 12 day. Well, here, let's see how fast my phone can pull it up. Here.
Pipers piping, the lords a leaping, while I'm doing this, ladies dancing, calling birds, French hens, turtle doves, Partridges. It's a bird themed.
Okay, so what you get is the first day, the partridge in a pear tree. The second day, it's 2 turtle doves. Third day is 3 French hens. Fourth day is 4 calling birds. 5 golden rings.
Right.
6 geese a laying. 7 swans a swimming.
See, for me, it would be,
8 maids a milking.
See, for me, it would be 2 pairs of sneakers, 3 pairs of winter boots, because that's where I'm at.
Okay. And it goes on and on. 9 dancing ladies and so on.
Lords, pipers, drummers.
Yeah. There's nothing in there about the IKEA shoe tree.
Which is weird.
You would think that they would have put that in.
Come on, it's Christmas.
But in any case, right? So why are we talking about this? Because this episode is going to, as we say in the podcast biz, drop right before Christmas. And we thought, let's just talk about what this 12 Days of Christmas thing is all about and what it has to do with Catholicism.
I did a time. You sent me a link and said, hey, read up a little bit on this.
Yeah, and try to prepare it. Did you not do the homework before this episode?
Like 90 seconds. I went through and anyway, this highlights one of the things I like about Catholicism. And that is that it's just full of reasons, of days to celebrate and all of these things. And Protestantism is not like that at all. Yeah. And so there's some history here and I think that's really cool.
Okay. So let's talk about this. Since you've clearly not done your homework, let's talk a little about the 12 Days of Christmas and why are there 12 Days of Christmas and that sort of thing.
Wait, I know it starts on Christmas Day, right?
Yeah, the 12 Days of Christmas begin on Christmas Day. So here's the thing about it. The modern American understanding of Christmas, and with that is a Protestant evangelical approach to it, is that Christmas is a one and done deal.
Right.
Like, okay, so you have the big build up. Christmas begins on Black Friday, when they pull down even before that. When they pull in America, they pull down the Halloween decorations in stores, right? Yeah. So like on November 1, we have the Christmas season.
Yeah, we're in it now.
And unless you belong to a certain kind of Protestant church, you probably don't celebrate something called Advent, or if you do, it's just like this sort of like low-key deal. But really for Protestants, the American commercial, whatever it is, which is crept all into American Christianity and everything else, or vice versa, is that the Christmas season begins effectively the day after Halloween, when the stores all swap things out and the songs begin, and you have this run up to Christmas, which is like the climax, the apex. It hits that, and then it's done. And as far as a holiday, from any liturgical standpoint, Christmas is a one and done thing. The day after Christmas, it's over.
The tree goes out by the garbage.
People keep it up or whatever, but it's in the rear view mirror. Christmas is over.
Yeah.
Now we're on to New Year's. But that's not the way it is, not only in the Catholic Church, but the way it was in Christianity from the beginning, from the ancient church. Okay. So if we go to the Roman Catholic Church, Eastern Orthodoxy, whatever, any of the ancient churches, the Christmas season liturgically, or it's not really the Christmas season, but what they call Christmas tide, begins on Christmas Day and runs 12 days through Epiphany.
Okay.
Which is January 6th.
About which I know nothing.
You've come to the right place. Now, I will say I did send you briefing materials. I texted you and said, Ed, at least read the Wikipedia article I sent you about the 12 Days of Christmas.
I scanned through it, but I had that shoe thing to put together.
That's right. Okay. Okay. We have Christmas Day, which celebrates the what? It was called it starts with an N, ends with a Y.
The Nativity.
The Nativity. We have the Nativity celebrated on December 25. And then we have this other liturgical holiday. And again, these are ancient things. This isn't some weird Catholic made up. It's American. Let me just say, American Christmas traditions don't go back much more than about 100 years or so. Yeah. So a lot of what we do in American Christmas is rooted in, at maybe the Victorian England period.
Sure.
So when you have the Christmas trees and Santa Claus and all of the traditions, Charles Dickens' Big Story, all of that's rooted in sort of Victorian era England and America, where all this stuff percolates out. Right. So the whole Father Christmas, Santa Claus thing first starts appearing in Sears catalogs in American Christmas in the 19th century, 1800s. Our Christmas traditions don't go much further back than that, really. But when we talk about Christmas in terms of the Nativity and Epiphany and what's called Christmastide or whatever, this whole 12 days thing,
right,
it really goes back to the ancient churches, thousands of years, their understanding of the liturgical year. So you have the Nativity on December 25.
Mm-hmm.
On January 6, you celebrate another feast day, liturgical day, called Epiphany. Epiphany celebrates the visit of the Magi. Remember the wise men?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
Okay, so the wise men show up with their gifts of, you got gifts, right?
Gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
Gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
The three wise guys.
It's a precious balm. Don't give a balm to the baby. So the thing is that they show up, and that is celebrated on Epiphany, on January 6th. And the days between the Nativity and Epiphany are the 12 days of Christmas. There's an 8-day octave, which is a thing in the liturgical calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And then you roll over, and this is called like the Christmastide in the liturgical calendar, this period. And that's where the 12 days come from. Now, there's a theological significance to all of this, okay? So when we look at the Nativity, we see Christ being given to the world, right? And in the Epiphany, what we have is Christ being given to the nations. Because when we think about the wise men bringing the gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh, right? These are non-Jews. These are, the Persian Magi from the East who come. And Corey and I recorded a conversation about this, which will come out on another episode where we talk about Epiphany and its significance and all that. But the thing is that we think of it as the wise men bringing presents to the baby Jesus, which is true.
Right.
But a deeper theological significance is that, in a sense, it is Jesus that's being given to the wise men. That the visit of the Magi represents Christ being given to the nations, to the Gentiles. And so between the Nativity and the gift to the nations, to the Gentiles, we have this 12 days that kind of celebrates this, if you would, this kind of movement between those two things. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yes, this is, of course, there was all this stuff that I didn't know, and I would have maybe, turned my nose up at it like, oh, there goes the Catholics again with the making up stuff.
Again, that's the thing. And when you think about that progression, the progression from the Nativity to Epiphany is the progression from the giving of Christ to the Jewish nation, right?
Yep.
Born in Bethlehem, the son of David, to its progression now. By the way, just to be clear, no one is saying that the Magi actually showed up 12 days later. In many instances, there's reason to think that the Magi visited quite a bit later.
Much later, yeah.
Much later. But the point is, on the liturgical calendar, it's celebrated, and that's the date that it is slotted for. Okay. There's other things that are going on in these 12 days that are on the liturgical calendar and feasts that are part of this 12-day celebration. So on December 25, we celebrate the Nativity, Feast of the Nativity. On December 26, we celebrate St. Stephen's Feast. Now, if you remember Stephen, he was the first Christian martyr. This is in Acts chapter 6, right?
Yep.
And he was martyred. It was the apostle Saul, who would become the Apostle Paul, who held the cloaks of the men who stoned Stephen. And so historically, that's connected. No one's actually saying that it happened, obviously, the day after Jesus was born, but that's where St. Stephen's Feast is slotted, because in the logic of the liturgical calendar, we see Christ being given to the world, which also then martyrdom is part of our response to that, right? It is connecting the joy of Christ's birth with the reality of what Christian witness entails. So if you think about living into the liturgical reality of that, we celebrate the nativity Christ has given to us, and we have a response to witness to the world despite the cost. And so St. Stephen's feast day is the next day.
Wow.
Then December 27, so first day of Christmas, second day of Christmas, third, right?
Right.
What we have is the feast of St. John the Evangelist. Okay, so this would be, John wrote, the beloved disciple who wrote the Gospel of John and the book of Revelation. And the Gospel of John opens chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word became flesh. This is all John chapter 1. And so it is picking up on the theme of the incarnation, the nativity, and then the reality that the Word became flesh and is given to us, and there is that testimony. So we celebrate the feast day of St. John. The next day, December 28, see how we're trying to track what's happening all these days? On the next day is the Feast of the Holy Innocents. Who are the Holy Innocents? Remember when King Herod discovered that...
all the 2-year-olds.
Right, he ordered that all of the male children under age 2 in the region of Bethlehem be put to death. And so all those baby boys were killed by Herod. And Jesus escaped that because Mary and Joseph headed to Egypt, right, to do that. And the Feast of the Holy Innocents is a recognition, a sober, if you would, reflection on the fact that there is a cost of Christ coming into the world. So again, if you're keeping track, we celebrate the nativity, the giving of Christ to the world, followed on the next day by St. Stephen's feast day, the reality of what it means for us to testify that Christ has come to the world. We celebrate the next day the feast of St. John, where we're recognizing that the Word was made flesh, and the value of that Word and the giving of the gospel. Then we have a Feast of the Holy Innocents, where we recognize that there is a cost to his coming into the world. Then on January 1, we have the Solemnity of Mary, the Mother of God. Now, we've done episodes in the past on in what sense Mary is the Mother of God, so I don't want to rehash that here. Right, through the Incarnation. But this is a huge day, and so in the Catholic calendar, we have certain days that are called solemnities. There's a handful of them throughout the year. And solemnities are days that we are obligated as members of the church to show up to Mass. They're the high holy days, and one of them is the Solemnity of Mary, the Mother of God. And I always love that it also falls on January 1, which begins the new year. So the first of New Year's Day, when we're recovering from New Year's Eve and we're watching football and all that kind of stuff on TV, we really start the new year by coming to Mass that morning. So like at our parish, like at 9 o'clock on New Year's morning, when everybody else has got a hangover or whatever, or watching the Rose Parade, getting ready to watch the Rose Bowl on TV, we're going to come to Mass and we're going to begin the year recognizing the reality of the Incarnation through Blessed Virgin Mary. So again, we're tracking what's going on in these 12 days, right? And then we come to Epiphany on January 6th, which, like I said, is an ancient feast. And in some regions, in fact, what's interesting is if you go into Eastern Orthodoxy, Epiphany even plays a bigger role. And in certain Christian traditions, that's when you give gifts. You don't give presents. So you still have time with that sad shoe thing
to
from
make up for
IKEA. You guys could have like actually cool presents on Epiphany, because the ancient tradition was that's when you give gifts, because that's when the gifts were given to the baby Jesus.
So like a really cool bookshelf or something from IKEA.
I remember when I was a kid, we had some neighbors, and they were, I don't know if they were Eastern Orthodox or what, but because I didn't understand all that when I was a kid. I just knew that their family was weird. Like those neighbor kids are super weird because they don't get presents on Christmas. They get presents like in January. And it was like, we get presents on something called Epiphany. And of course, I'm like a kid. I don't even know what any of this means. I just thought, well, you poor kids and your family's super weird. You get some like sad presents,
I didn't know what Epiphany was, and I got a shoe thing
15 minutes ago.
I got a shoe thing. So
That's right. So the thing is that on Epiphany then, and again, like I said, I think that there's this dual reality here where Epiphany, on the one hand, we think of it as the Magi giving presents to Jesus, but if we think of it in the larger context of this progression, when we think about all those prophecies in Isaiah, the Old Testament, about how the kingdom of God, how the light will be given to the Gentiles and go to the ends of the world, how Jesus in the Great Commission says, take this to all nations, that to all nations the gospel, to all nations Christ will go. And so in that way, when we think of the Magi coming to Christ, and we celebrate that on Epiphany, in a sense we can say, well, that's them bringing presents to the baby Jesus, but in a sense that is the first encounter of Christ with the nations, with those wise men from the East, the Persian astronomers or whatever they were, astrologers or whatever, going, hey, look, Christ already when he was a child is being given to the nations, and the nations are coming in, because that goes back to that prophecy in Isaiah about how all the nations will come in to the kingdom and worship the king. And that's what we see happening in Epiphany. So this whole idea of the 12 days of Christmas is to recognize that in Catholicism and in the ancient churches, and I'll say something about that in a second, but that Christmas isn't this one and done celebration. That Christmas is a ongoing liturgical event. We have a Christmas celebration that celebrates not just Christmas and the presents and the eggnog and the mistletoe and all that kind of thing, but really celebrates the coming of Christ into this world and all the things that follow from that. And that rolls out over these 12 days within the liturgical calendar.
With all the celebration of Advent that the Catholic Church does, which in the Protestant world we pretty much never did. Or if we did, it was only a little bit. This is rich with symbolism and all that, and things that you can attach yourself to, and ways of celebrating, and ways of connecting with all of this, rather than just, I don't know.
Think about the Christmas season. I'm joking earlier, but starting the day after Halloween and being the season of buying stuff and whatever, all the things that we do, really within the Catholic Church, Christmas is a season of reflecting on the reality of the Word becoming flesh and the fullness of that and how it enters into history. And these 12 days are a time where we celebrate, reflect, pray on multiple aspects of that. We have Christ's humility in the nativity. We have the response, our response in faith in St. Stephen's feast day and the feast day of St. John. We have reflections on the cost of discipleship. We have reflections, in a sense, on the sort of global scope of salvation, culminating in Epiphany. And it really becomes a season, a tremendously powerful season of reflection, prayer, worship that extends these 12 days. So instead of this kind of one and done day and then we're into just football playoffs or whatever, or which, by the way, there's nothing wrong with, because I'm a huge football fan and I'm super excited about the football playoffs and all that as well, but I can multitask and say, but the more important thing in my life at this time, these 12 days are that. So a couple things just, though, to clarify. So when I keep talking about Eastern Orthodoxy and how this is an ancient thing, and somebody out there is going to write me an email saying, I dropped this ball. So the Eastern Orthodox have the same dynamics in terms of this season of reflection. It's just their calendar is different. And that has to do with the difference between two liturgical calendars. The Julian calendar, which goes back to Julius Caesar, the old Roman calendar, okay? And the Eastern Orthodox churches, for the purposes of liturgy, still operate around the Julian calendar. So the dates are different. Whereas the Roman Catholic Church operates on something called the Gregorian calendar, which was from Pope Gregory later on. So the long and short of that is that some Eastern Orthodox churches that still operate on that older calendar celebrate Christmas on January 7 because of the difference in the liturgical calendars, right? And then they call Epiphany, they have a different word for it, they call it the Theophany. And then it's a similar thing in terms of the season and days, but just the calendar is different. So what I want to say is, I'm not saying the Eastern Orthodox follow the exact same dates, obviously, but the principle is the same. The difference between the Nativity and the Epiphany or Theophany, and they have their own sort of liturgical calendar rotating around that. But all of us from the ancient churches, unilaterally, together, we all collectively reject the sort of American one and done sort of deal. And there are some other denominations. So the 12 Days of Christmas gets incorporated into Anglicanism, and some Lutherans and some Protestant communities still recognize Epiphany, and they still recognize these sort of 12 days of Christmas. And that's how some of this stuff got into with the song. We got to wrap up here with the song with the Lords a Leaping and the Maids a Milking and all this kind of thing. Because the song has no significance in the Catholic Church. It's just like a song that arose a couple hundred years ago. And it has, just to be completely clear to everybody listening out there, we baited and switched you on this episode because the song, the 12 Days of Christmas, have nothing to do with the 12 Days of Christmas in the Catholic liturgical calendar. The song, other than recognizing that there are 12 days in the Christmastide, Christmas season, but all of the Lords a Leaping and Partridges and pear trees and all that has zero impact, which somebody's going to tell me that I'm wrong, because there's this thing that floats around on the internet. And oh my gosh,
they wouldn't put it on the internet if it wasn't
wouldn't
true.
Be true, right? But it's on the internet. So on the internet, there is this thing that floats around from time to time claiming that all of those Lords a Leaping and Maids a Milking and swans a swimming and hens a laying or whatever it all is, that all of that is this secret code explaining Catholicism from the time in England when Catholics were being persecuted by the Church of England, right? So after the Reformation, the Church of England, persecuted Catholics. And so the story goes that Catholics, to remember like Catholic theology, to remember the catechism, they encoded it so that supposedly the Maids a Milking stands for something, and the swans a swimming, and the hens a laying, and the Lords a Leaping, they all have some kind of like theological significance, and that the internet legend is that little kids or something would be taught this song so that secretly they could be taught like this coded catechism. And like many things on the internet, that's total crap. I don't know if I can say that.
You're saying it's not true.
I'm saying it's not true. There's no truth to that. It's just and that idea has been floating around for a long time, even before the internet, but it's just not true. There's no truth to it. Actually, probably the origins of the song, it was very popular in the Middle Ages to have counting songs.
Sure.
You're a musician. Part of it is remembering songs that people can sing along. And that's how we learn stuff and makes sing-alongs fun that people can write. And there's some folk songs like that of the counting things. And so it was a popular thing, especially in a day when you didn't have necessarily printed lyrics, and you certainly didn't have iPods or whatever. And so you would sit there and you'd go, okay, we can learn the lyrics. Remember, let's count down 12 to this, to 11 to this, and then and it's a fun sing-along, right? If you do the 12 Days of Christmas, you're teaching kids it, or you're doing it sitting around the fire, or you're sitting around whatever. It's fun. You're a musician. You'd go, okay, everybody remember now it's 9 and 8 and 7 and 6. And so these kinds of counting songs were very popular in England.
Yep.
I don't know in other cultures too, but they were popular. And so somewhere along the way, several hundred years ago, the song itself doesn't go back to the Middle Ages like people think. It probably goes back about to the 1700s. But somewhere along the way, like this thing got popularized and became a fun song to sing around that time of the year, and people could remember it. And it's catchy, and you try to remember the 7, the 8, and the 6, and the 5. But it doesn't have any theological significance. So the Lords a Leaping, Maids a Milking, and all that has nothing to do really with the Catholic 12 Days of Christmas. But the Catholic 12 Days of Christmas are theologically rich, deeply biblical, liturgically significant. And so my encouragement to everybody is, as you come up to Christmas this year, to extend Christmas. Okay? Think about this as an opportunity to go for 12 days. Let's live into the reality of the incarnation, culminating the giving of Christ to the world in the manger, culminating in the giving of Christ to the nations in the visit of the Magi, and reflecting on all of these realities of our response and responsibility to witness, to reflect on His Word, to honor the power of the incarnation, and all these things that occurred during that time, building up to the reality of what it meant that Christ came to the world. And it's a powerful way to live in and reflect on the gospel. And I encourage people to think about that, to use this time, and maybe if you are in a Protestant church or whatever, to think about Epiphany and the significance of Epiphany and perhaps celebrate it.
I learned something today. What did I learn today? A bunch of stuff. One of the things I learned was I didn't know what the Feast of Stephen was, St. Stephen, and now I have context for good King Wenceslas looked down on the Feast of Stephen.
Yeah.
Which was the day after Christmas.
There you go.
See? Now
exactly.
The bonus here is that I will have that song in my head, in particular the Mannheim Steamroller version of it, rather than the 12 Days of Christmas, which would have made me insane on the way home.
Look, and I also think that you can think of ways that over those 12 days, you can, if you think about the partridge and the pear tree as the baseline of the counting song, right? You could say the IKEA shoe tree.
I was just going to go there.
On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a shoe tree from IKEA. On the second day of Christmas, my true love gave to me. And you've got opportunity to build from there.
Not only that, but see, the IKEA, we could go with IKEA gifts. And that's rich because they, of all the weird names that they give things.
And
you know?
On the seventh day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 7 paper towel holders, like Helgegood paper towel holders, 6.
Every once in a while, those names will come up. The paper towel holder will be like TOWLHLDR towel holder. And I'm thinking, come on, that's not Swedish.
That's right.
That's some guy in an office having fun.
Exactly. All building up to, on the 12th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 12 Northern Lights shower curtains and whatever. And a shoe tree in the hallway.
From IKEA. This has possibilities.
All right. Hey, I want you to all enjoy the 12 days of Christmas liturgically. Think about that. Reflect. Lots of resources on the internet. And maybe if you have the opportunity, get yourself to the Solemnity Mass on the morning. You can record the Rose Parade and maybe go to Mass on the morning of January 1 for the Solemnity of Mary, the Mother of God. And maybe you can go to a Mass on January 6th, the Feast of Epiphany.
There we go.
And have a Merry, Merry Christmas to all of you.
Yes.
Amen. Hey, if you enjoyed this, please rate and review the podcast. And would you maybe give a gift here for Christmas? Wouldn't object to 12 donations to the Considering Catholicism podcast, which would help keep us going in the new year for 2025. So thanks very much, and God bless you all.